Bert. Lonely rancher thought she only came for water, but she asking him to teach her how to use her hands. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm orange glow over the quiet ranch. Dust rose gently from the dry soil, curling around the tall wooden fences and the small herd of cattle grazing lazily in the distance. The rancher, a man in his late 40s, moved slowly across the property, his boots crunching against the gravel. Years of working the land had given him strong, calloused hands and a careful way of moving. He had been alone for a long time, ever since his wife had passed and the ranch had become both his home and his companion. Every corner of the property carried memories. The barn where he had built the first stable with his own hands, the well-worn fence posts where he had leaned to watch the sunset, and the old oak tree under which he had shared quiet conversations with his wife. Life on the ranch was predictable, almost painfully routine. Each day started before the sun, feeding the animals, checking fences, and tending to the small orchard behind the house. The rancher liked this life because it required focus, discipline, and patience. Yet despite the beauty of the land and the satisfaction of hard work, a quiet loneliness lingered in the spaces between his tasks. The sound of wind through the trees or the soft lowing of the cattle was comforting, but it was not the same as having another person to share a laugh with or speak to about life. On this particular afternoon, the rancher was filling the troughs for the animals when he noticed a figure in the distance. At first he thought it was one of the neighbors passing by, but as the figure drew closer, he realized it was a young woman he had not seen before. She was small, carrying a tin canteen in her hands, and moved with a careful, almost hesitant step. The heat of the day was visible in her flushed cheeks, and her clothing was simple but well kept, suggesting that she had traveled a distance to reach the ranch. The rancher watched quietly from behind the wooden gate, unsure whether he should call out or let her approach on her own. He had seen travelers before, people passing through the area in need of water or rest, and most kept moving once they were refreshed. There was a curiosity in her eyes as she approached the trough, glancing around at the animals and the fences. When she finally reached the water, she set her canteen down carefully and began to fill it, her hands trembling slightly as she held the tin under the spout. He cleared his throat, and she looked up, startled but quickly offering a polite smile. "Hello," she said softly.
"I hope I'm not bothering you. I just need some water." The rancher stepped forward slowly, keeping his voice calm but firm.
"You're not bothering me. This is just a working ranch. Water is no problem, but are you sure you can handle the animals around here?"
"They can be."
Breath. Curious. She laughed, lightly, a sound that was soft and nervous. "I think I'll manage," she said, though her eyes betrayed uncertainty. There was something in her manner, a mixture of hesitation and determination, that made the rancher pause. Most travelers would not stay long enough to speak more than a few words, but she seemed reluctant to leave.
"I'm just passing through," she added, almost as if sensing his question.
"I needed to refill my canteen, and I thought I might rest here for a little while." The rancher nodded, watching her carefully. There was something about her that reminded him of a time long ago when people had a quiet respect for the land and the work it required. Breast. He didn't often see that anymore.
"All right," he said finally.
Breath. "You can rest here, but stay close to the trough. The animals aren't dangerous, but they are large, and they don't always notice people around them." She thanked him, her voice gentle, and sat down on the edge of the trough, wiping her hands on her pants. The rancher returned to his chores, occasionally glancing her way. There was a quiet dignity about her, a curiosity that reminded him of someone learning a new skill for the first time. As he worked, he noticed her looking at the tools scattered around the barn, her fingers brushing over the handle of a hammer and the rough wood of a fence post. Bet she didn't touch the tools in a careless way. Instead, it was as if she was studying them, trying to understand their purpose. After a few moments she spoke, her voice soft but steady. Do you always work alone? The question took him by surprise. He stopped mid-step, considering her. It had been so long since anyone had asked him something personal, and he felt a flicker of hesitation. Mostly, he admitted.
The ranch keeps me busy. I like having control over the work.
It's simpler that way. She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than she let on. It must be peaceful, she said, to be able to focus on your own work, to know that everything depends on your own hands. He had spent years in solitude, convincing himself that the peace he felt was enough. Yet hearing her say it out loud stirred something unfamiliar, a gentle awareness of how much he missed conversation, shared effort, and even a little companionship. For the rest of the afternoon she stayed quietly at the trough, occasionally sipping from her canteen and observing the rancher as he moved from task to task. She asked no further questions, yet her presence seemed to fill the empty spaces of the ranch. There was no urgency in her movements, no rush to leave. She simply existed in the rhythm of the ranch, a quiet witness to the man's work and dedication. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, the rancher approached her with a bucket of fresh water. Psst. If you're going to stay for the night, he said, you'll need more than that canteen. The nights out here can get cold, even in summer. She looked up at him, a small smile playing on her lips. I wasn't planning to stay, she said, but maybe just until the evening cools a bit. He nodded, respecting her independence, yet a part of him felt a quiet hope that she might stay longer. He fetched a chair from the porch and placed it near the trough, gesturing for her to sit. It's better here than on the dry ground, he said simply. For a while, they sat in silence, the only sounds being the soft lowing of the cattle, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional clink of the water bucket. She watched the rancher as he wiped sweat from his brow, his movements careful and precise, and he felt her eyes on him, observing without judgment. There was a gentle curiosity in her gaze, a desire to understand the life he had built with his own hands. Finally, she spoke again. I've never done anything like this before, she admitted.
I grew up in the city and, well, I don't really know how to do hands-on work.
But I've always wanted to try, to understand what it's like to create something with my own hands. Brust, surprised by her honesty. He had expected a visitor to be curious about the animals or the land, but she was speaking about work in a deeper sense, about learning, about connecting with the earth and the effort it required. It's not easy, he said cautiously. But it's honest work. If you're willing to learn, I can show you a few things. Her eyes lit up, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Really? You'd teach me? He nodded slowly. I can. But it's not just about knowing what to do. It's about patience, paying attention, and respecting the work. If you're willing to put in the effort, you can learn. Rest. She smiled, and for the first time that day the rancher felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. There was a quiet determination in her, a willingness to try despite uncertainty, and he found himself admiring it. He didn't often meet people who were willing to step into a world so different from their own, and yet she seemed ready to do just that. The evening passed with the two of them talking quietly, sharing small stories about life, work, and the land. She asked questions about the ranch, the animals, and the routines he followed, and he answered with patience, explaining each task in detail. There was no rush, no pressure, just a steady exchange of knowledge and curiosity. As night fell and the first stars appeared in the clear sky, the rancher realized that the ranch no longer felt quite as empty.
Her presence, quiet and respectful, had filled the space with something he had long forgotten. connection.
And as she thanked him for the water and the conversation, he found himself hoping she would return the next day, not just for water, but to continue learning, to continue sharing the rhythm of the ranch with him. Little did he know her visit was not just about thirst or curiosity. She had come seeking something deeper, a chance to learn, to grow, and to understand how to use her hands in a way that connected her to the world around her. Breath, and the rancher, in his quiet solitude, was about to discover that teaching her could also teach him about trust, companionship, and the unexpected joys of shared effort. The night settled over the ranch, cool and calm, with the soft sound of the wind through the trees and the occasional low of the cattle.
Inside the small house, the rancher poured himself a cup of coffee and thought about the young woman at the trough.
He had expected a simple visit, a brief exchange of water and polite conversation. But what he had found instead was the beginning of something unpredictable, something that might just change the quiet rhythm of his life. And for the first time in a long while, he looked forward to tomorrow. The next morning, the rancher woke to the familiar sound of roosters crowing in the distance. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of the dry earth mixed with the faint smell of hay from the barn. He had barely finished his morning chores when he noticed the young woman walking toward the ranch again. Desk. She carried herself with confidence this time, but there was still a hint of nervousness in her steps. The rancher watched quietly, leaning against the fence as she approached the trough. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady but warm. "I hope I'm not intruding." He shook his head.
Not at all.
"You're welcome to be here." She smiled, setting down her canteen and brushing her hair back from her face.
Breaths. Yesterday was different. I've never done anything like this before, but it felt right.
Breath. He nodded, sensing there was more behind her words. "It's not easy work," he said cautiously.
The ranch takes a lot of effort, and it's easy to make mistakes if you're not careful. "I don't mind mistakes," she said quickly. "I want to learn. I want to try." The rancher studied her for a moment. Most visitors would never ask to try, never ask to get their hands dirty, but she seemed sincere. There was a determination in her eyes, a quiet fire that made him think she might actually follow through. "All right," he said finally. Breath.
If you want to learn, I can show you some things, but you have to promise to listen and take your time.
"There's no rushing this work." Breath. "I promise," she said without hesitation, and her smile was bright enough to lift the rancher's spirits more than he expected.
He started with small tasks.
"Let's start with something simple," he said, handing her a piece of rope. "We need to check the fences."
"Some posts are loose, and I need you to help me tighten them." She nodded, picking up the rope carefully. At first her hands trembled slightly as she tried to understand how to knot it correctly. The rancher noticed her hesitation but said nothing, letting her work through it on her own. "That's all right," he said finally. "Take your time. Learning is about patience." Over the next hour, she struggled a little, sometimes tying the knots too loosely, sometimes too tightly, but she listened, adjusted, and tried again. The rancher found himself impressed with her persistence. Many people would have given up after the first few mistakes, but she kept going, her hands moving with more confidence with each attempt. After the fence was secure, he led her to the barn. "Next," he said, "we'll work with the animals. You'll learn how to feed them and check their health, but be gentle. They're not used to strangers." Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded.
I can...
The rancher demonstrated first, showing her how to hold the bucket of feed without spilling, how to speak softly to calm the animals, and how to observe for any signs of discomfort or illness. Then he stepped back, letting her try. Breaths. She approached the cows cautiously, her movements careful and respectful. The animals responded well to her, and the rancher noticed a quiet satisfaction on her face as she completed the task successfully.
Breaths. You're learning quickly, he said, genuinely impressed. Not everyone has this patience or care.
Thank you. It feels good to be able to do something with my hands and see the results.
I've never felt this before, Britt.
The day passed with a steady rhythm of work. They repaired fences, cleaned the barn, and tended to the orchard.
Each time she made a mistake, the rancher corrected her gently, and each time she succeeded, he praised her sincerely. Slowly, a bond was forming between them, built on trust, shared effort, and the quiet satisfaction of honest work. During a short break, they sat under the shade of the oak tree. The rancher handed her a cold bottle of water, and she sipped it gratefully. Breath. I didn't realize learning could feel like this, she said. It's exhausting, but it's also exciting. Ravens, I feel like I'm actually doing something real. Breath. That's the thing about hands-on work. It takes effort, but it teaches you things you can't learn from books or stories. You learn patience, focus, and how to solve problems on the spot. She smiled, looking down at her hands, now calloused and smudged with dirt. Bruss, I like that, she said softly. I want to keep learning. I want to understand everything about this place, the work, the animals, the land. I want to know how to use my hands properly, like you do. For a moment the rancher was silent. He had been alone for so long, and now this young woman was asking him to teach her, to share his knowledge and experience. He felt a mix of surprise, pride, and a little nervousness. It won't be easy, he said finally. But if you're serious, I'll teach you. You have to promise me that you'll listen, respect the work, and never rush through it. I promise, she said firmly. The rancher smiled. All right then. Let's start with the tools. He showed her how to hold a hammer properly, how to use it without straining her wrist, and how to measure and mark the wood before making a cut. Breath. At first her movements were awkward, and the hammer felt heavy in her hands, but she kept trying. The rancher corrected her gently, demonstrating techniques and giving her encouragement. Slowly she began to move more confidently, each swing of the hammer more precise than the last. As they worked together, they talked about life outside the ranch. She shared stories about the city she came from, about her family, and about the desire she had always felt to connect with the land in some way. The rancher, in turn, shared stories about the ranch, about his late wife, and about the challenges and joys of working alone for so many years. Their conversation was easy, filled with laughter, curiosity, and occasional moments of quiet reflection. By mid-afternoon, they had repaired several sections of the fence and organized the tools in the barn. The young woman was tired, her hands sore, but her eyes sparkled with accomplishment. I didn't think I could do this, she said, but it feels amazing to see the results of my work. Breaths. That's the reward of hard work. When you see something you've built or fixed with your own hands, it gives you a satisfaction nothing else can. You've learned a lot today, and I can see that you're determined to keep going. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the ranch, the young woman sat on a hay bale, wiping the sweat from her brow. Breath. Thank you, she said quietly, for teaching me, for being patient with me, and for letting me be here. The rancher felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Her gratitude was genuine. But more than that, her presence had brought a sense of life back to the ranch he hadn't realized was missing. You're welcome, he said simply. I see potential in you. You just have to keep practicing and paying attention. That's the way to learn anything. She nodded, a small smile forming on her face. I will, she said. I want to learn everything I can. That night, as the rancher sat in his small kitchen sipping coffee and listening to the wind rustling through the trees, he thought about the day. He had expected a simple visit from a traveler seeking water, but instead he had spent hours teaching, guiding, and sharing stories. The ranch had felt alive in a way it hadn't in years, filled with conversation, laughter, and the quiet rhythm of shared work. Rasp. He realized that her visit was not just about learning to do ranch work. It was about something deeper, about connection, trust, and the desire to grow in a world that required effort, patience, and care. Breath. And he, in turn, was learning something he hadn't expected. The joy of guiding someone, of sharing knowledge, and of seeing another person develop confidence and skill. As he closed the kitchen door and stepped outside to check on the animals one last time before night fully fell, he saw her silhouette against the darkening sky, sitting quietly by the trough. She looked up and waved, and he waved back. A simple gesture, yet it carried a warmth and a promise. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring more work, more lessons, and more moments of connection. And for the first time in a long while, he was eager to see what the next day would bring. Because this young woman had come for more than water. She had come to learn, to grow, and unknowingly to bring life back to a lonely rancher who had spent years working alone. And as he turned to lock the gate and return to the house, he realized that teaching her to use her hands was about to teach him something even more important. The value of patience, the joy of connection, breath, and the unexpected ways in which life could change when you open your heart to another person. The days passed quickly on the ranch, each one blending into the next with the rhythm of work and the warmth of shared effort. The young woman returned each morning, and the rancher found himself looking forward to seeing her. At first, he had thought she came only for the water or for a brief escape from the city, but now it was clear that she wanted something more. She wanted to learn, to grow, and to understand the life of someone who worked the land with his own hands. Her skills were improving steadily. Each morning she arrived with determination in her eyes, eager to tackle the day's tasks. Brass. She moved with more confidence now, her hands steady and her approach deliberate. The rancher watched her quietly, occasionally correcting small mistakes but mostly letting her work through the challenges herself. There was a quiet pride he felt in seeing her succeed. A satisfaction that came from knowing he had helped someone discover a new skill and a new sense of self. One morning he handed her a small bucket of feed and led her to the far side of the barn where a few young calves were waiting.
These little ones need extra care, he explained.
You'll need to feed them carefully. Make sure they get enough without startling them. And check that they're healthy. She nodded, adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder. I can do that, she said confidently, though there was a faint hint of nervousness in her voice. She approached the calves slowly, speaking softly and extending her hand so they could sniff it. The rancher observed her from a distance, impressed by her patience and gentleness. Many people would have rushed, trying to get the task done quickly, but she seemed to understand the importance of moving carefully and respectfully. You've learned quickly, he said, walking over to check her work. Not everyone would be able to handle the calves this well after only a few days. She smiled, a mixture of pride and relief on her face. Thank you. Breaths. It feels amazing to see them respond to me. I didn't know I could do this. As they worked together, the rancher began to notice subtle changes in himself. His usual solitude, which he had long considered comfortable, now felt less necessary. He found himself enjoying her presence more than he expected, not just because of the work, but because of the conversations they shared. They talked about everything, her childhood, his memories of the ranch, the animals, and the routines that governed life on the property. There was an ease in their interactions, a rhythm that developed naturally as they spent more time together. During a break, they sat on the edge of the barn's wooden platform, watching the sun rise higher in the sky. The rancher handed her a bottle of water, and she accepted it with a grateful smile. "I didn't expect learning to feel like this," she said softly. "It's hard work, yes, but it's also satisfying. I feel like I'm accomplishing something real, something meaningful." "That's the beauty of hands-on work," he said. "It teaches you patience, focus, and how to think on your feet. You learn more than just the task at hand. You learn about yourself, about persistence, and about the satisfaction of doing something properly." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I think I'm starting to understand. It's not just about finishing the work. It's about the process and about respecting it. And I think I'm starting to respect my own abilities more too." The rancher felt a small warmth in his chest. Her words reminded him of his late wife, who had also understood the importance of patience and care in all things. But unlike before, this time he felt a quiet happiness rather than a pang of loneliness. Here was someone who was learning, growing, and sharing the experience with him. In the following days, the rancher began to teach her more advanced tasks. He showed her how to mend fences properly, how to balance weight when lifting hay bales, and how to sharpen tools safely. She struggled at first, often frustrated when the tasks didn't come easily, but she persisted. Each time she stumbled, the rancher offered guidance without judgment, letting her learn from her mistakes and encouraging her to try again. "You're getting stronger every day," he said one afternoon as she lifted a bundle of hay with steadier hands. "Not just physically, but in the way you approach the work. You're learning to think ahead, anticipate problems, and handle challenges without rushing." She smiled, a little breathless from the effort.
I'm learning from the best.
She said teasingly, though her tone held a genuine sense of admiration. Brash. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the rancher and the young woman would often pause to rest, sharing small meals and drinking water while talking about their day. Their conversations had become deeper now, moving beyond work to personal stories and reflections. She would ask him about his life before the ranch, about his family, and about the experiences that had shaped him. In turn, he shared stories of his wife, of challenges he had faced alone, and of the lessons he had learned from years of working the land. One evening, after a long day of repairing fences and organizing the barn, they sat together under the old oak tree, watching the sun set. The sky was painted with streaks of orange, pink, and purple, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of the ranch, the lowing of the cattle, the rustling of leaves, and the distant call of a bird returning to its nest. "You know," she said softly, "I never realized how much work goes into something like this. Every task matters. Every effort counts." "It's humbling, but also inspiring." The rancher nodded. "It is. And it teaches you something important about life. When you put your heart and your hands into something, you see the results. You feel the satisfaction of effort, and you learn to value your own work and your own abilities." She looked at her hands, now rough and smudged from the day's work. "I feel like I'm discovering a part of myself I never knew existed," she admitted. "A part that wants to try, to work hard, and to learn. And I think I'm starting to enjoy the challenge, even when it's difficult." The rancher felt a quiet pride swell in his chest. He had expected to teach her about tools and tasks, but he was discovering that he was also teaching her about confidence, patience, and self-respect. And in return, he was learning about companionship, the joy of sharing knowledge, and the subtle warmth that comes from seeing someone grow under your guidance. As the days turned into weeks, Their bond grew stronger. The young woman became more skilled and self-sufficient, yet she continued to seek his guidance, not out of dependence, but out of trust and respect. She asked questions about techniques, about the animals, and about the land, always eager to learn more. And the rancher, in turn, found himself opening up more than he had in years, sharing stories and lessons he had once kept to himself. One afternoon, as they worked together to repair a section of fencing damaged by a recent storm, the young woman paused and looked at him. I really appreciate everything you're teaching me," she said. "I didn't expect to feel this way, but it's more than just learning to work. It's about understanding life in a way I never have before. Operations. And I think I'm starting to care about this place, and about the work, in a way I never thought possible."
The rancher nodded, feeling a deep sense of connection.
"That's the point," he said gently. "This place, the animals, the work, it's not just about labor. It's about respect, patience, and commitment. And it teaches you lessons you can carry with you in every part of life." As the sun set, painting the ranch in shades of gold and purple, they paused to admire their day's work. The fence was straight and sturdy, the barn was organized, and the animals were calm and well-fed. There was a quiet satisfaction in the air, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond physical labor. "Thank you," she said softly, looking at him with genuine gratitude. "For teaching me, for being patient, and for believing I could do this." The rancher smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. "You did the work yourself," he said.
I only guided you. You've shown determination, patience, and respect.
"That's why you've succeeded." That night, as the rancher sat alone in his small kitchen, sipping a cup of coffee and listening to the wind rustling through the trees, he thought about the young woman and the days they had spent together. He realized that her visits were no longer just about learning the ranch work. She had brought life, laughter, and energy back into the quiet ranch. And he, in turn, had learned something unexpected: the joy of companionship, the satisfaction of teaching, and the subtle beauty of watching someone grow under your guidance. For the first time in a long while, he felt a quiet hope for the future. Not just for the ranch, but for the possibility of connection, trust, and shared experience. He knew that tomorrow would bring more work, more lessons, and more opportunities to grow together. And he found himself eager for it, because the young woman had come seeking knowledge and guidance, and in doing so she had unknowingly brought warmth and life to a lonely rancher who had spent too many years working alone. But as he closed the kitchen door and stepped outside one last time to check on the animals, he saw her silhouette against the starlit sky, sitting quietly by the barn. She looked up and waved, and he waved back, a simple gesture, yet it carried a promise of trust, friendship, and the quiet, steady growth of a connection neither of them had expected, but both had begun to cherish deeply. The days on the ranch had grown longer, but the hours seemed to pass faster than before. The young woman had become a familiar and comforting presence, her hands skilled now, her movements confident, and her spirit bright with curiosity and determination. The rancher, who had once thought he would spend his days alone, found himself enjoying the sound of her laughter, the way she asked questions, and the quiet pride in her eyes whenever she accomplished a task. Their bond had grown steadily, built on shared work, trust, and mutual respect, and it was something neither of them had expected. One morning, as the first light of dawn spread across the ranch, she arrived earlier than usual. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of dew and earth. She carried a small notebook and pencil, her way of recording what she was learning. The rancher raised an eyebrow, smiling. "Planning to take notes today?" he asked. She laughed softly. "I want to remember everything. Every task, every trick, every lesson. I feel like I'm learning more than I ever imagined, and I don't want to forget a single thing." Attention to detail is important, and remembering what you learn will help you grow, not just here on the ranch, but anywhere in life. Their morning was filled with work, as usual. They repaired fences, fed the animals, and tended to the orchard. The young woman's hands moved with skill and confidence now, and the rancher found himself stepping back more often, letting her handle tasks on her own while he observed. He could see the careful thought in her movements, the attention to detail, and the respect she showed for the animals and the land. During a break, they sat on a bench near the barn, the sunlight warming their faces. She opened her notebook and looked through her notes, occasionally pointing out something she didn't fully understand. "I still have trouble with this part," she said, showing him a sketch of a fence joint. He leaned over, pointing gently. "It's about understanding the pressure points. If you tighten here and loosen there, it balances the wood and keeps the fence stable." "You've been improving, but this is a more advanced step. Take it slowly. Feel the wood, and you'll understand." Watching him carefully as he demonstrated again. Then she tried herself, her movements more precise this time, the rancher observed quietly, proud of her patience and determination. "There," he said finally, smiling. "That's how you do it. See?"
You're getting it.
Her face lit up with a smile that warmed the rancher's heart. "I did it!" she exclaimed, as if her success was a small victory over the challenges of the world. They worked together for hours, the rhythm of their labor punctuated by occasional laughter, conversation, and quiet reflection. The young woman began to share more personal thoughts, speaking of her dreams, fears, and the life she had left behind in the city. She spoke of feeling lost at times, of wanting to find purpose and skill through her hands, and of how the ranch had given her a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she needed. The rancher listened carefully, offering guidance when appropriate, but mostly providing a safe space for her to speak freely. He had spent so many years alone that he had forgotten the importance of conversation, of sharing stories, and of simply being present for someone else. And now he found himself opening up in ways he hadn't anticipated, revealing stories of his late wife, of the hardships of ranch life, and of the moments of joy and pride he had experienced despite the solitude. One afternoon, a sudden summer storm rolled in, dark clouds moving quickly across the sky. The wind picked up, and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. "Desk," the young woman looked up at the sky, startled. "We need to get inside," she called, running toward the barn. The rancher followed, laughing at her urgency. Together they secured the animals and moved the tools inside, working quickly in the rain. By the time they were finished, they were both soaked, but there was a shared sense of accomplishment and excitement in the air. The young woman laughed, shaking water from her hair, and the rancher felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't known in years. Desk. After the storm passed, the rancher suggested they sit on the porch and dry off. They brought blankets from the house and shared a warm drink, watching the storm clouds move away and the sun return. "You handled that well," he said. "Most people would have panicked or frozen." "You stayed calm and focused," she smiled, a little shyly. "I had good guidance," she said softly. "I've learned a lot from you, but about the ranch, but about staying calm, thinking ahead, and trusting myself." The rancher nodded, feeling a sense of pride that went beyond the work itself. "You've come a long way, but in confidence, and I can see that you're capable of much more than you realize."
In the weeks that followed, their work together became almost seamless. They communicated with simple gestures, understood each other's rhythm, and shared small victories without the need for words.
Breaths. The young woman could handle almost any task on the ranch, yet she continued to seek his guidance, not out of necessity, but out of respect and a desire to learn. And the rancher, in turn, found joy in teaching, in sharing his knowledge and in seeing her succeed. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and purple, they sat quietly near the barn, watching the animals graze. The rancher noticed the young woman's thoughtful expression and asked, "What are you thinking about?" She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "I'm thinking about how much this place and this work has changed me." Breaths. "I came here to learn how to use my hands, but I feel like I've learned so much more about patience, trust, and believing in myself." And grasp. He glances around in despair. Brasp. He had not expected to hear such words, but he understood them deeply. "And what have you learned from me?" he asked softly. "Beth," she smiled, a little shyly, "that it's okay to take your time, to make mistakes, and to trust someone when they guide you. And that connection, even with someone you barely knew, can change your life in ways you never imagined." The rancher nodded, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. He had taught her how to work, how to respect the land, and how to use her hands, but she had taught him something too: the joy of companionship, the warmth of trust, and the simple happiness of sharing life with another person. Days turned into weeks, and their bond continued to deepen. They worked together, laughed together, and shared stories late into the evenings. The rancher found himself looking forward to each day, not just for the work, but for the presence of someone who had become an important part of his life. And the young woman, once uncertain and inexperienced, had grown into a skilled, confident, and capable young woman who respected the ranch, the animals, and the man who had guided her. Breaths. One quiet evening after a long day of work, they sat by the old oak tree, the stars beginning to twinkle in the clear night sky. The rancher looked at her, seeing not just a student, but a friend, a companion, and someone who had become part of the rhythm of the ranch. "You've come a long way," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." She smiled, reaching out to place a hand gently on his arm. "And I'm grateful for you, for your patience, your guidance, and for believing in me even when I doubted myself." There was a quiet moment between them, filled with understanding, respect, and unspoken emotion. Neither rushed, neither forced the moment, yet both felt the depth of their connection. The rancher realized that he no longer felt the same loneliness that had once defined his life. Her presence had brought warmth, joy, and companionship, and he knew that the bond they had formed was something lasting. In the days that followed, their routine continued, but now it was filled with a sense of shared purpose and quiet intimacy. Grasp. They celebrated small successes together, faced challenges as a team, and continued to learn from each other. The young woman had become skilled, confident, and self-reliant, yet she never stopped feeling proud of her growth. By the end of the summer, the ranch felt alive in a new way. The fences were sturdy, the animals healthy, and the barn organized. But more importantly, the rancher no longer felt the emptiness that had once defined his life. The young woman had brought light, energy, and connection into his world, and in doing so, they had both grown in ways they could never have predicted. On one particularly quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the ranch was bathed in soft gold, the young woman turned to him. "I came here to learn how to use my hands," she said softly.
But I feel like I've learned so much more about life, about trust, and about finding someone who believes in you.
Psst. The rancher nodded, his heart full. "And I've learned that teaching isn't just about sharing knowledge. It's about connection, patience, and understanding. Boris, you've brought life back into this ranch, and into my life." They sat together in comfortable silence, the sounds of the ranch surrounding them, the gentle lowing of the cattle, the rustling of leaves, and the distant call of a night bird. There was a quiet peace, a sense of fulfillment, and the deep understanding that their connection had transformed both of them. And in that moment, they knew that their journey together, through work, learning, and shared experiences, was only the beginning. They had discovered something rare and valuable: trust, companionship, and the quiet joy of growing together, hand in hand, heart in heart, on a ranch that had once been quiet and lonely, but was now alive with connection, purpose, and hope.